Hey, and welcome back to JBC English Learning Academy. My name is Laura, and I'm here to guide you on your journey to clear, confident, and natural English. If you truly love Jesus, like the video, subscribe to the channel, keep watching the video believing in Jesus, you will learn something good. And comment to let us know what you are watching. Your support truly helps this channel grow. Alright, take a deep breath, relax, and let's begin today's session. I want you to imagine something very simple, something very quiet, something that almost feels like the beginning of a movie where nothing big has happened yet, but you can feel that something important is coming, and you can feel that this small moment, this tiny situation, will one day become a lesson you remember for the rest of your life. And this is how many successful people learn their first lesson early, not with noise, not with big events, but in small silent moments that almost no one notices. And in this story, I want to take you into one of those moments, and as you listen, speak with me slowly, breathe with the story, and feel the English as if it is part of your own thinking, like a soft voice guiding you from inside. Because this is how you grow your speaking and listening skills, not by rushing, but by staying in the moment, just like our character in this story. A young boy named Aaron who is sitting on the steps outside his small house early in the morning, holding a notebook with nothing written inside, and he is thinking, actually he is waiting. Because today he wants to understand something that adults always talk about but never explain clearly, something people call success, something people call discipline, something people say you must learn early if you want a better life, but no one tells him what it really means. And as he sits there, the sun just rising, the air still cool and soft, he hears the quiet sound of someone sweeping the street. And that someone is Mr. Lien, an old man in the neighborhood who wakes up before everyone else, and every morning he sweeps the street with slow, calm movements, like he is not cleaning the ground, but cleaning his own thoughts, and Aaron watches him for a long time, wondering why the old man does this when no one pays him. No one asks him, and no one even thanks him, and slowly, this curiosity becomes the first hook in Aaron's young mind, because he keeps thinking, why does he do it? Why wake up so early? Why work when it is not your job? And this question sits inside him like a small stone in his pocket, something small, but something he can feel with every step he takes. And finally, after watching the old man move back and forth with his broom, Aaron stands up and walks toward him, and the old man hears his footsteps and turns around with a smile, the kind of smile that rises easily, like it has been practiced for many years, and Aaron asks him in a soft voice, almost embarrassed, "Why do you sweep the street? No one tells you to do it." And the old man laughs in a light, warm way, not a loud laugh, but a simple one that says he has heard this question many times, and he answers, "I do it because it needs to be done." And Aaron feels confused, because the answer is too simple, and he was expecting something big, something clever, something like adults say on TV or in books, but the old man just keeps sweeping and says, "If you wait for someone to tell you to do everything, you will wait your whole life." And Aaron stands there thinking about that sentence, and he feels something inside him move, like a small switch turning on, and he does not understand everything yet, but he feels the shape of the lesson, the outline of something important, something successful people learn early, which is the idea that small actions, quiet actions, actions no one sees, are sometimes the beginning of everything, and as he watches the broom slide across the ground, he thinks about this idea because all his life he has heard people say, "One day I will start, one day I will try, one day I will be ready." But the old man does not wait for one day. He simply begins every morning, even when he is tired, even when the weather is bad, even when no one cares, and this becomes part of Aaron's memory, a memory that will stay with him through many years, and he will think of this morning again and again, even when he becomes older, because it is the day he learns the quiet lesson of beginning, of starting without waiting for permission, and as he stands there, the old man looks at him again and says, "Success is not one big thing. It is small things repeated again and again until you become the kind of person who does not give up." And those words are simple, almost too simple, and maybe that is why they stay in Aaron's heart, because simple truths can enter the mind gently but deeply, and Aaron nods, not because he fully understands, but because something inside him agrees even without explanation, and the old man continues sweeping, and Aaron goes back to the steps outside his house and opens his notebook again. But this time the empty page does not make him feel nervous, because he remembers that starting is the first step. Even if he does not know what to write yet, and he holds his pencil and writes one small sentence, "Do the thing that needs to be done," and when he writes it, his handwriting shakes a little, but he smiles, because now the page is no longer empty, and he has taken a small step. A step no one else will see, a step no one else will praise, but a step that will grow into something bigger later. And as he closes the notebook, he thinks about the old man's simple movements, the broom moving back and forth like a quiet rhythm of life, like a reminder that every day begins with a choice, and every choice becomes a habit, and habits shape a person's future. And as the sun rises higher, the neighborhood becomes louder, children running, adults rushing to work, cars passing by. But Aaron feels something different inside him, a calm feeling, a feeling that he can choose how to live, and that choosing to start early, to act early, to learn early, is a gift he can give himself, and he breathes slowly and tells himself, "If I want to become better, I can begin with one small thing," and this realization becomes a seed in his mind, and seeds grow slowly, but they grow with time, and as he walks back into the house, he knows he will look at life a little differently from now on, because he has learned the first quiet lesson of successful people, the lesson of starting early, starting small, and starting even when no one tells you to do it, and the day continues, but the feeling stays, and this is how transformation begins. Not with a loud moment, but with a soft understanding, a realization that the earlier you learn this simple truth, the more time you have to build your life, and before the scene closes, before the moment ends, Aaron whispers something to himself, something he feels deeply now. "I can begin, even if I am not ready," and those words settle inside him like an anchor, giving him balance, giving him direction, and giving him the courage to continue learning the lessons that successful people learn early in life. After that quiet morning with the old man and the broom, Aaron begins to notice small choices around him, choices that feel unimportant but slowly begin to shape his day and his mind. And he starts to understand that successful people are not just born with luck or talent. They notice these small moments, these little opportunities that everyone else ignores, and he sees it first in school, in the classroom, where lessons are taught and repeated over and over, and many children pay attention. Only when a teacher raises a hand or calls on someone, but Aaron begins to try something different, something simple. He decides to answer small questions quietly, even when no one asks him. He decides to read one extra page in the textbook at lunchtime. Not because anyone told him to, but because he feels a small curiosity inside, a whisper that says, "This matters," even if no one sees it, and with each choice, each quiet action, he begins to feel a sense of control over his life, because he is learning that choices, even small ones, are like bricks that build a house, and the house of life is built slowly, day by day, brick by brick, choice by choice, and one afternoon, he faces a challenge that tests this idea, because his class has a big project due, a project that seems overwhelming, like a mountain he cannot climb, and some of his classmates complain loudly, some decide to copy what others do, some give up before they begin, but Aaron remembers the old man sweeping the street. And he feels a tiny voice inside that says, "Start," even if it is small, so he begins, not by writing the whole project, not by planning everything at once, but by opening the notebook and writing the first sentence, and that sentence feels weak and awkward. But it exists, and as he writes, he realizes that this small beginning makes the next step easier, and the next one after that, and soon he has completed half of the work without even noticing the time, and in this process, he learns the first truth about small choices, that even tiny actions accumulate, like drops of water filling a cup, and eventually, they create something meaningful, and this realization transforms how he sees effort and work, because before, he thought only big achievements mattered, only the finished product, only the applause or the grade, but now he notices the quiet power of starting and continuing, of showing up each day, each hour, each moment, and this lesson continues outside school. In ordinary life, in the streets, in the small routines that adults follow and children often ignore, like helping with chores, organizing a room, or even learning a skill like riding a bicycle or playing an instrument. And Aaron begins to notice that successful people often do these things not because anyone forces them, but because they quietly choose to do what needs to be done, even when no one is watching, and he begins to experiment with this idea in his own life. Choosing to practice speaking English for 15 minutes every morning, choosing to listen to a story in English before going to bed, choosing to repeat new words out loud, slowly, clearly, and with feeling, because he has learned that repetition and small choices create habits. And habits shape the mind, and a shaped mind grows stronger every day. And as the weeks pass, Aaron sees another truth, which is that making these small choices is not always easy, because temptation to ignore them is strong, and distractions are everywhere, from friends inviting him to play, to games, to watching television. But he notices that the feeling inside, the quiet voice that says, "Do what matters," is stronger when he practices consistently, like a muscle that grows when exercised. And he also notices that when he misses a small step, when he decides not to act, the day feels different, lighter in a strange way, almost empty. And he feels a gentle regret, not loud or painful, but soft and noticeable, like a warning, and this feeling teaches him that every small choice matters, because life is made of moments, and each moment carries a decision. And each decision shapes the person he becomes, and this understanding begins to change his attitude toward learning English, because now he sees it not as a class, not as a test, not as something to finish for a grade, but as a daily opportunity to make a choice, to speak one sentence, to listen to one story, to practice one word, and each choice builds confidence. Each small repetition builds flow. Each effort builds a foundation, and one day, he notices that he can speak longer sentences, understand more words, feel more comfortable expressing himself, and it feels natural, because the change did not come from a single big lesson. It came from hundreds of small choices repeated over time, and Aaron begins to reflect on this, thinking how adults often try to rush success, trying to find shortcuts, trying to achieve everything at once. But the truth is that the foundation is always quiet, always slow, always repeated, and the power of small choices is in their consistency, in their daily practice, in their unnoticed accumulation. And he remembers that quiet morning with Mr. Lien and the broom, and he smiles because he understands now that success is not magic, it is a process, and this understanding brings him calm, because he feels that he can control his own growth, one choice at a time, and in this calm, he notices a new curiosity forming, a desire to explore more lessons, to see what other small habits and choices build a strong life, because now he knows that learning is not about speed. It is about rhythm. It is about paying attention to the small things, noticing what matters and acting, and with each passing day, each small act, he begins to build a rhythm in his life, a rhythm of listening, speaking, thinking, acting, and reflecting, and this rhythm feels like music, slow music, steady music, and he realizes that successful people live in this rhythm, even if it is invisible to others, and as he practices this, he begins to notice another lesson. That small choices are not just about work or study, they're about character, because when you consistently do what is right, even when no one sees, you strengthen not just skills but integrity, and integrity becomes a habit, and habits shape destiny. And Aaron feels a quiet pride, not arrogance, not loud, just a steady warmth that grows from knowing he can rely on himself, that he can act early, act small, act consistently, and as he ends the day, closing his notebook again, he realizes that this is not a one-time lesson. It is a cycle, a pattern that repeats, morning after morning, small choices creating habits, habits creating strength, strength creating confidence, and confidence giving courage to take bigger steps in the future. And this reflection gives him hope, because he understands that life is long, and early learning matters, and by noticing small choices today, he is quietly preparing himself for tomorrow. And this is how the transformation begins, not with a single brilliant action, but with hundreds of unnoticed, small choices that build the character, skill, and discipline of someone who will one day achieve great things, not because they are lucky, but because they learned early, they acted quietly, and they believed steadily in the power of small, consistent effort. And this realization becomes another seed in Aaron's mind, a seed that will grow slowly, persistently, and beautifully, shaping his journey into adulthood, into mastery of English, and into the life he hopes to live. All starting from a quiet understanding that small choices are not small at all. After weeks of practicing small choices and noticing how they add up, Aaron begins to encounter a new challenge, something different from simply starting early or acting consistently. And this challenge is patience, the kind of patience that feels slow, almost invisible, and yet shapes everything in life, because he notices that some lessons, some skills, some progress do not happen quickly, and he remembers the times he tried to learn English fast, trying to memorize many words in one day, rushing through reading or listening to long stories without pause, and he realizes that these attempts left him tired, frustrated, and confused. And now he begins to understand that the best growth is not sudden but gradual, like a tree growing in a garden, like a river carving a canyon over years, like the small broom strokes of Mr. Lien sweeping the street every morning. And so he begins a new experiment, this time with patience, choosing not to force himself, choosing to accept small progress, and choosing to enjoy the process rather than only focus on the result. And one afternoon, he sits under a big tree in the park near his house, opening a book in English, a book with simple sentences, stories about ordinary life. And he reads slowly, repeating each sentence in his mind, pronouncing each word carefully, and as he does this, he notices something new. The words begin to feel familiar, the rhythm of English begins to enter his thoughts, and he does not feel pressure. He only feels curiosity, and with this slow approach, he begins to connect words into sentences, sentences into stories, and stories into understanding, and he realizes that learning, like life, cannot be rushed, because rushing misses the beauty of small steps, the small understanding, the small connection that grows into mastery. And this is the lesson of patience, a lesson that successful people learn early, even if they do not notice it at the time, because mastery is not about speed, it is about persistence and calm observation, about letting time do its work while you act steadily and consistently. And Aaron begins to practice speaking aloud, slowly forming sentences about his day, about the morning with Mr. Lien, about small choices he made, and with each sentence, he feels more confident, more present, more alive. In English, because he is not afraid of mistakes, he is not afraid of slow progress. He is only attentive, only curious, only patient, and as days turn into weeks, he notices that he can remember more words, form longer sentences, express ideas more clearly, and even understand stories that once seemed impossible. And this progress is not sudden, not dramatic, not praised by anyone, but it feels deep, real, and lasting, and this is the power of patience, because he begins to understand that learning is like planting seeds. If you water them every day, give them sunlight, and care for them gently, they will grow naturally. But if you try to pull them out or force them to grow faster, you will only damage the roots. And Aaron notices that his English is growing in this way, because he practices daily, even a little, even if it feels slow, and over time, those small actions add up into something bigger, something strong, something permanent. And he begins to see that this is not just about English. This is about life itself, because success, skill, happiness, confidence are all built patiently, slowly, over time, and he remembers times when adults complain that they did not have enough time, that things are too hard, that success is impossible, and he thinks about how different their path might have been if they learned this lesson early, the lesson of patience, the lesson of respecting time, respecting small progress and respecting the quiet growth that occurs behind the scenes, unnoticed by others, uncelebrated, but real and essential. And Aaron begins to reflect on moments in his own life when he became impatient, when he gave up on something too early, when he compared himself to others and felt frustrated. And he understands now that those feelings were natural but temporary, because they disappear when you focus on steady, patient action, when you focus on what you can do now, not on how far you have to go. And with this reflection, he feels a sense of freedom. Freedom from comparing, from rushing, from fear, and he begins to notice that patience also brings clarity, because when you act slowly and observe carefully, you see things others miss, you understand lessons others ignore, and you feel your own growth more deeply, like a quiet river flowing beneath the surface of life, unseen but powerful. And one day, while practicing speaking English with his notebook, he decides to record his voice slowly, one sentence at a time, listening to himself, correcting mistakes, repeating words, and he realizes that he enjoys this process, not because of instant results, but because the act itself feels meaningful, because it is patient, deliberate, and attentive. And he begins to practice with friends too, speaking slowly, listening carefully, correcting gently, and he notices how patience spreads, how others respond positively, how conversations become smoother, clearer, richer. Because patience allows space for understanding, for mistakes, for growth, and for connection. And as he continues this practice over months, he notices another subtle but powerful lesson. Patience builds confidence, not flashy confidence, not loud confidence, but deep, quiet confidence that rests on consistent effort, on experience, on noticing small improvements, on trusting yourself to act every day. And with this realization, Aaron understands a key truth about successful people, a truth often hidden in books, videos, and speeches, but visible in practice. They succeed not because they rush, not because they try to do everything at once, not because they show off, but because they combine early action, small choices, and patient effort over long periods. And this lesson fills him with hope, because he now sees that he can apply this in every part of life, not just English, but school, sports, friendships, and personal goals. And he feels a sense of pride, not boastful, but steady, because he knows that his patience is real, practiced, and effective. And this brings him calm, because he no longer fears slow progress. He no longer worries about mistakes. He trusts the process, and he begins to notice another layer of patience, which is the patience to reflect, the patience to think, the patience to learn from experiences rather than only seeking results. And this reflection deepens his understanding, because he sees that learning, success, and mastery are all cycles of action and reflection, effort and observation, choice and patience. And by practicing these cycles early, by learning them slowly and steadily, he prepares himself for life in a way few people do, because most people look for shortcuts, for instant results, for fast praise. But he has discovered that the most important growth happens quietly, patiently, consistently. And as he closes his notebook under the big tree, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves, he whispers softly to himself, "Patience is my strength," and feels it sink into his mind, his body, his habits. And this moment, simple and quiet, becomes another seed of wisdom that will shape his future actions, choices, and success, because the lesson of patience is not learned once, it is lived every day, through every slow, deliberate action, and Aaron now understands that mastery, happiness, and confidence grow in this patient rhythm, slowly, steadily, beautifully, just like a tree, just like a river, just like a person who learns early the secret of waiting, acting, and trusting the process. As Aaron grows in his quiet practice of early action, small choices, and patience, he soon encounters another important lesson, one that many successful people learn early, but one that is often uncomfortable at first. And that is the lesson of learning from mistakes, because mistakes are everywhere in life, in school, in learning English, in friendships, and in decisions, and he begins to notice them clearly for the first time when he tries to write a short story in English. A story about his day and the old man sweeping the street, and he makes many mistakes, spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes, mistakes in pronunciation when he reads aloud, and at first, he feels frustrated, he feels embarrassed, he wants to stop, he wants to give up. He thinks that maybe he is not ready, that maybe he is not good enough, and this feeling is natural, but then he remembers the lessons he has already learned, the quiet power of starting, the accumulation of small choices, and the patience that allows him to progress slowly, and he realizes that mistakes are not failures, they are signals, they are feedback, they are part of the process, and with this understanding, he decides to try again, slowly, carefully, and deliberately, noticing each error, repeating each word, correcting each sentence, and as he does this, he feels a new kind of excitement, a curiosity to discover where he went wrong and how he can do better, and he begins to see that mistakes are actually gifts because they point out the gaps in understanding, they illuminate what needs attention, and they give him an opportunity to act, to choose differently, and to improve, and over time, he notices a change in himself, because when he makes a mistake, he no longer feels fear or shame, he feels focus, he feels clarity, he feels a desire to understand and fix the problem, and this is a powerful shift because he begins to see that successful people do not avoid mistakes, they embrace them. They analyze them, they correct them, and they move forward, and this understanding transforms his approach to learning English, because he stops worrying about speaking perfectly, he stops worrying about forgetting words, he stops worrying about confusing tenses, and instead he focuses on communicating, expressing ideas, and noticing errors as they happen, and when he notices them, he repeats, corrects, and learns, and slowly, mistakes become stepping stones rather than obstacles, and one afternoon, he decides to record himself speaking a short story about his day, and when he listens, he notices several mistakes in pronunciation, some awkward pauses, and a few words missing, and instead of feeling embarrassed, he writes notes, practices those words, repeats the sentences, and records himself again, and the second recording is better, and then the third, and then the fourth, and he notices that the improvement is real, tangible, and encouraging. And he reflects on this process and realizes another truth about mistakes. They are most powerful when you respond with attention, reflection, and action, because ignoring mistakes leads to repeated errors, but embracing them leads to growth, and this lesson also extends beyond English, because in life, Mistakes appear in every choice, every decision, every relationship, and when handled with curiosity and responsibility, mistakes become teachers rather than threats, and Aaron begins to share this understanding with his friends, explaining gently how mistakes are important, how correcting them is part of learning, and how patience is needed to see the results. And he notices that when he speaks this way, his friends start to change too. They become less afraid of errors, more willing to try, more willing to speak and act, and this reinforces his own learning, because teaching others also strengthens understanding. And one evening, he reflects quietly in his notebook, writing about a day filled with small mistakes, small corrections, small progress, and he realizes that each error, each adjustment, each retry has shaped his growth more than perfect practice ever could, and he begins to remember times when adults avoided mistakes, when they wanted to be perfect, when they feared judgment. And he notices that those adults often miss opportunities because they stop trying too soon, because they avoid risk, because they fear being wrong. And he understands now that embracing mistakes is not just about learning English, it is about preparing for life, because life rewards those who act, notice errors, learn, adjust, and continue, and Aaron sees that this approach creates confidence, resilience, and independence, because he is no longer relying on approval, validation, or fear of judgment. He relies on observation, reflection, and action, and this is exactly what successful people learn early: the courage to act, the curiosity to notice mistakes, and the discipline to correct and improve. And as he closes his notebook that evening, looking at the quiet street outside, he smiles softly because he feels that mistakes are no longer enemies. They are friends. They are guides. They are steps on the staircase of learning. And he whispers to himself, "Mistakes help me grow." And those words settle gently in his mind, giving him reassurance, freedom, and motivation, and he knows that tomorrow he will act again. Make small choices, practice patience, and yes, make mistakes, but he will embrace them, because each mistake is part of the path toward mastery. And as he drifts to sleep that night, he dreams not of perfection, but of progress, slow, steady, and real. And he feels that this understanding will shape not only his English, but his character, his actions, and his future success, because the early lessons of successful people are not secrets, not complicated formulas. They are the simple, repeated, patient, attentive actions of noticing mistakes, learning from them, and moving forward quietly, steadily, and with purpose. And this reflection leaves him calm, confident, and ready for the next day, the next challenge, the next lesson in a journey that is continuous, infinite, and deeply rewarding. As Aaron continues his journey of learning English and understanding life, he begins to notice a pattern, something that links all the lessons he has learned so far: starting early, making small choices, practicing patience, and learning from mistakes. And this pattern is called consistency, the quiet, powerful force that holds everything together, because he realizes that a single action, a single choice, a single practice, or even a single correction is not enough to create lasting change. And true improvement comes from repeating these actions day after day, even when it feels boring, even when it feels slow, even when results are not visible. And he begins to see this most clearly in his English practice, because at first, speaking aloud, writing sentences, and listening to stories every day feels repetitive, almost tedious. But over weeks, then months, he notices a change, small at first, almost invisible, but real. Because the words come easier, the sentences feel smoother. And understanding grows naturally, and he reflects on the old man sweeping the street, and he understands now that the broom strokes, repeated every morning without complaint or fanfare, are an act of consistency. And he realizes that consistency is what transforms small actions into habits, habits into skills, skills into character, and character into success, and he begins to apply this to other areas of life as well. Choosing to wake up a little earlier each morning to read English, to write a few sentences, to review mistakes, to listen to a story, to speak slowly with friends, and even when he does not feel motivated, he chooses to act because he understands that motivation comes and goes, but consistency creates results. And this understanding brings him a quiet confidence, a sense of control, because he is no longer waiting for inspiration or excitement. He is simply showing up every day, repeating small actions, and trusting that the results will accumulate. And one afternoon, he faces a test at school, a speaking test in English, and he feels nervous because speaking in front of the teacher and classmates is always a challenge. But then he remembers the months of consistent practice, the small choices he made each day, the patience he cultivated, the mistakes he learned from, and he realizes that consistency has prepared him more than any single day of study could. And as he speaks, slowly at first, carefully, then with more fluidity, he notices that the sentences flow more naturally, the words sound right, the pronunciation is clearer, and the teacher smiles, nodding, because the improvement is real, tangible, and the result of quiet daily effort. And this reinforces Aaron's understanding that consistency is not about perfection. It is about showing up. It is about repeating small actions. It is about trusting the process. And as he walks home, he reflects on other areas of life, remembering times when he or others gave up too soon, stopped trying after one or two failures, and he notices that those people miss the benefits of consistency because growth, mastery, and success require time, repetition, and patience, and he also realizes that consistency creates momentum because each small action makes the next one easier, each repetition builds confidence, and the habit becomes stronger, so that eventually, acting consistently feels natural, automatic, and effortless, and he begins to see that consistency also builds discipline, because when you act daily, even without motivation, you train your mind and your body to follow through, to keep promises to yourself, to take responsibility for your growth, and this discipline carries over into all areas of life, from schoolwork to friendships, from personal goals to hobbies, and even to future challenges. Because a person who has learned the power of consistency early is prepared to act steadily, calmly, and effectively, no matter what obstacles appear, and he notices that successful people often have this habit, this rhythm of daily action, repetition, and steady effort, and this is why they achieve long-term results that others cannot, because consistency is the secret force behind skill, confidence, and achievement, and Aaron begins to build a daily routine, one that includes small, consistent actions in English, reflection, mistakes, correction, and practice, and he notices how this routine shapes his thinking, his habits, and his sense of responsibility, and he even starts to enjoy the process because he sees the steady progress, the invisible growth, and the rhythm of learning, and he reflects on the early lessons of life, remembering the quiet morning with Mr. Lien, the small choices, the patience, the mistakes, and now the consistency, and he realizes that all these lessons connect. They form a path, a pattern, a method for living, learning, and growing, and he feels grateful that he noticed these lessons early, because learning them late would have been much harder, and this gratitude gives him motivation to continue, to act every day, to embrace mistakes, to practice patience, to make small choices, and to trust the power of consistency. And one evening, as he closes his notebook and looks at the sky, he whispers softly to himself, "Consistency creates progress," and he feels a warm, steady confidence, because he knows that the small actions of today will become the big achievements of tomorrow, and he understands that successful people do not rely on luck, on sudden inspiration, or on a single brilliant moment. They rely on the quiet, repeated, patient, attentive, and consistent actions over months and years, and this realization fills him with calm, purpose, and energy, because he now sees that he has the power to shape his own growth, his own learning, and his own life, one day, one choice, one action at a time. And as he drifts to sleep, he dreams of future projects, future stories, future successes, knowing that consistency will guide him through them, and this lesson, simple and quiet, becomes another seed planted deep in his mind, ready to grow, flourish, and support everything he will achieve in the years to come. As Aaron grows through the lessons of starting early, making small choices, practicing patience, learning from mistakes, and embracing consistency, he begins to notice another truth, a truth that challenges him and stretches him beyond his comfort zone. And this truth is the courage to take risks, because he realizes that even with all the practice and preparation in the world, life sometimes requires stepping into the unknown, trying something new, and facing uncertainty, and he first encounters this lesson during an English storytelling contest at his school, when the teacher announces that students will perform a short story aloud in front of the class and some parents, and Aaron feels nervous, a mix of excitement and fear, because public speaking has always been harder than private practice, and the thought of everyone listening to him, judging him, noticing mistakes, makes his stomach tight, and he almost wants to refuse, almost wants to hide, almost wants to stay in the safety of his notebook. But then he remembers all the lessons he has learned, starting early, making small choices, practicing patience, learning from mistakes, and building consistency. And he realizes that avoiding the challenge would break the pattern he has worked so hard to create. And he remembers Mr. Lien, the old man sweeping the street every morning, starting early, acting consistently without waiting for permission or approval. And he feels a small spark inside, a whisper saying, "You can do this." And he decides to take the risk, to stand up, to speak, and to act despite fear. And as he steps to the front of the classroom, he feels his heart beat faster, his palms slightly sweaty, his mind racing, but he takes a deep breath, recalling the patient practice and consistent effort he has done, and he begins to speak slowly, clearly, expressing his story about small choices, mistakes, and growth. And at first, the words stumble a little, the pauses feel long, and he makes a small mistake in pronunciation. But he keeps going, correcting himself gently, focusing on communication, and as he continues, something remarkable happens. The words start to flow more naturally, The sentences feel familiar. And his voice gains calm confidence, and he notices the attention of his classmates, the nods of the teacher, and the soft smiles of the parents, and he realizes that the risk, though uncomfortable, has allowed him to discover new strength, new confidence, and a new level of expression. And he reflects quietly after the presentation, realizing that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite fear, the decision to step forward even when the outcome is uncertain. And he begins to see that successful people do not avoid risk. They calculate, prepare, and then act, knowing that mistakes, failures, and discomfort are part of the journey. And this understanding changes Aaron's approach to learning English, because now he is willing to speak aloud more often, to participate in discussions, to ask questions, to try longer sentences, to experiment with new words. And he notices that each act of courage builds confidence, strengthens skill, and teaches him something new, and over time, he sees that risk-taking is connected to all the other lessons he has learned, because starting early allows him to act. Small choices guide him in preparation. Patience allows him to persist. Mistakes teach him correction. Consistency keeps him moving forward. And courage allows him to step into situations where growth is possible. And he realizes that risk-taking is not about recklessness. It is about preparedness, learning, and the willingness to step outside comfort. And he begins to notice risk in small ways in everyday life, choosing to answer questions in class without waiting for someone else, choosing to try speaking with new friends, choosing to present a small project creatively instead of safely. And he finds that each small risk strengthens his voice, his thinking, and his presence, and he remembers that life rewards those who act courageously, not always with immediate recognition or reward, but with growth, confidence, skill, and deeper understanding. And he notices that even failures become lessons when approached with courage, because the risk itself opens a door to learning. And he begins to internalize another truth: courage grows like a muscle, stronger each time it is used, and avoided each time it is ignored. And by practicing small courageous acts early in life, he prepares himself for larger challenges in the future, challenges in school, friendships, careers, and life decisions. And he begins to see that risk-taking and courage are closely connected to freedom, because without courage, one remains trapped in fear, in habit, in avoidance. But with courage, one experiences growth, expression, and possibility. And as he reflects on this, he remembers his quiet mornings, small choices, patience, mistakes, and consistent practice, and he realizes that courage is the bridge between preparation and achievement, between skill and opportunity, between effort and result. And he feels a quiet pride, not arrogance, but steady assurance that he can face challenges, try new things, and speak even when afraid. And he begins to speak more confidently in English, narrating stories, sharing ideas, participating in class, and even mentoring younger students in small ways, because he understands that teaching courage and leading by example reinforces his own growth. And over time, he notices another subtle but important layer of courage: the courage to fail publicly, the courage to accept criticism, the courage to revise and improve, because true growth comes from acting in the open, learning from feedback, and continuing despite discomfort. And as he writes in his notebook that evening, reflecting on his first public storytelling experience, he writes a simple but powerful sentence. Courage is acting despite fear, and he feels it sink deeply into his mind because he knows that life will constantly present situations where fear exists, where outcomes are uncertain, where risk is necessary, and by learning this lesson early, he prepares himself to navigate challenges, learn faster, and grow steadily, and he feels a warm confidence knowing that courage, like patience, consistency, and attention to mistakes, is a habit, a skill, and a practice that can be strengthened with daily effort. And as he closes his notebook, he whispers softly to himself, "I can act even when I am afraid," and he smiles because he now knows that this courage will guide him in every area of life, in English, in learning, in decisions, and in becoming the person he hopes to be, because success is built on the willingness to step forward, take risks, and act, even when the path is uncertain, even when mistakes happen, and even when progress feels slow. And Aaron finally understands that the courage to take risks early in life is one of the greatest gifts he can give himself, and it is a lesson that will echo in everything he does from this moment forward.